Everyone who is joining us virtually, welcome to the Brunch with REC. I am back again. Jazz, Simeon, they try to hold me back. They didn't want me. They didn't want me to be presenting here. But I'm here, and I'm ready. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion. I'm going to be pulling back the curtain a little bit and explaining how our portfolio management division actually builds these short-term and long-term plans for investors. And it's something that is very near and dear to my heart because I run that portfolio management division. Myself, there are a few portfolio managers here, Jesse, Sumit, Zach, who actually go and sit down with all of our REC insiders through what we call a real estate action plan. And we, every single day, sit down together to try and get a little bit cleaner on the way that we advise. And the nice thing about real estate, and the one thing that I've really gravitated towards, is that it is truly not a one-size-fits-all plan. My plan, your plan who's watching virtually could be totally different. But if we have direction, if we have a goal in mind, we have a destination, we can at least tailor or customize these very personalized plans for investors. And that's what I'm going to be speaking about today, how to plan your portfolio with direction. And I think especially with today's current state of the market, direction is critical. It is something that we all need as investors ourselves. And we need to know what it is that's possible today and how can we get to wherever we need to be. Before I go into building what we call a laddering plan, I did want to do a little bit more of an overview of the different types of assets within real estate that us as investors have the ability to explore. And before the actual opportunities itself are broken into two different categories. We have passive investments in real estate and active investments in real estate. Active investments in real estate are opportunities or asset types where we actually have to go and get a mortgage for the property. Passive opportunities are ones where our money is just being used and we're not doing too much of the management. We're just investing into certain different asset types, and we're just allowing that money to compound, grow, and get paid out in certain staggered maturity dates. Examples of passive investments are land development. So you're partnering up with a builder, not to actually purchase a unit, but to help fund the development. Usually the payout date for land development opportunities are at the completion of the specific low-rise, mid-rise, high-rise, or commercial development. There's REIT investments. REIT investments is the ability to partner up with other investors, and your money is going to be used within a holdings company to actually go and purchase real estate. That could be multifamily opportunities, that could be traditional residential opportunities or commercial opportunities. The growth is determined based on the value of the specific holding company, as well as the cash flow in some cases. REIT investments have a little bit more of a flexible payout structure and less rigid of a maturity date. Your funds aren't stuck there as long compared to that land development opportunity. And then the last passive side that we see a lot of investors explore is private lending. Private lending, you're either partnering up with a larger institutional investor or just your everyday purchaser who either needs funds to help them with their upcoming closing or through construction. Right now, with the current state of interest rates, private lending might be an advantageous opportunity, but as things, in my experience, become more advantageous, it also comes with a little bit more risk. The higher interest rates that you're charging that person you're loaning your money to comes at the risk with the higher risk of delinquency. Them not being able to pay out at the agreed date, so you have to extend it, or the lack of delinquency anyways when it comes to payback. And those are passive opportunities. Those are three different passive asset types that you actually don't need to get a mortgage for. The active side of real estate investing can be broken down to a few different types of assets. First is your traditional residential investment. Your traditional residential investment, something like a resale condo that's already built, a duplex, a triplex, all the way up to 5 doors or less. That's your traditional residential investment. Typically, because these are active opportunities, These are ones that you will have to get a mortgage for. With your turnkey residential, you're going to have to get a mortgage relatively quick. The typical down payment is 20% of the original purchase price. And the advantages of your turnkey residential is, first, you have the ability for cash flow. These types of opportunities could give you, if you're trying to fulfill cash flow in your portfolio, in some markets, the ability to achieve that. You also have the ability for passive appreciation. These turnkey residential opportunities seem to be, in most cases, the asset type that does have the most stable of passive growth. We're usually seeing in prime markets between 4 to 6% per year compounded growth in those turnkey residential opportunities. And the main reason why is that it has the largest pool of buyers who are looking for these types of opportunities. You also have the ability, through paying down your mortgage and the passive appreciation, to actually leverage growth a little bit faster than other asset types through creative financing, through your home equity lines of credit, or through refinancing. The things to consider, though, for turnkey residential opportunities, first and foremost, is you will have to get a mortgage. So you have to understand your financing capabilities. And that's done fairly quickly. In most cases, you should understand where you stand financing-wise before you even start looking for these opportunities itself. Next, it is an active opportunity. You will have to manage that specific property. You will have to deal with vacancy, screening opportunities, screening tenants, as well as the day-to-day operations of that specific asset. In most cases, condos are a lot easier to manage compared to the detached, the semi-detached, the duplexes, the triplexes. But in all cases for turnkey residential, you will have to manage that specific property, and that's something to speak about as well. The nice thing about REC Canada, to speak about how we try and make these types of opportunities as hands-off as possible. We do also have our real estate concierge division, which can help you source out local contractors, cleaners, mortgage brokers if your properties need that. If you need help having a fresh set of eyes on a lease agreement or screening tenants, that doesn't cost any of our insiders really anything to do. It's something that we do through our concierge division as a value-added service. Another thing to consider with the turnkey residential is competition. When you're actively actually looking at the opportunity, as I said, one of the advantages is the desirability factor, which is nice because it gives you a little bit more of that stable passive appreciation growth. Well, we're also going to have to compete with other purchasers when we're trying to go and find those opportunities. Out of all the asset types, the turnkey residential seems to be the one that has the most competition, and it is something to note. I would probably advise, when you are looking at turnkey residential, let's say like a turnkey duplex, try to have your top of your budget in mind. When you're putting in an offer in a specific property, make sure you don't go over whatever that value is that you and your team have set based off of the comparative market analysis. If someone wants to pay more for it, that's great. The one advantage we have in today's market is that there will be more listings down the road. We have the ability. As investors, we do have to eliminate a little bit of that, personal feelings behind a specific property. We should always lead our decisions based off of the numbers that we're calculating. Try to eliminate some of that emotion. And that's turnkey residential. Again, those are the resale condos, duplexes, triplexes, all the way up to 5 doors. Next is pre-construction condos. Pre-construction condos is within that residential asset type, but I like to separate it because it is a completely different investment. With pre-construction opportunities, you're going to be buying a unit from the builder. You will not be putting down the 20% in most cases instantly. It is extended through the construction process in these incremental deposits. And that's one of the advantages, is that you're not putting all of your capital down at once in most cases. Second, because you're buying from essentially a blueprint, you will not need to get a mortgage until the completion of that condo itself or of that development itself. As well, you do have to understand the closing costs. The closing costs with pre-construction is something that you should, calculate because there is a little bit more closing costs involved with a pre-construction condo compared to that turnkey residential. Every condo is different, but it's important to understand that. The advantages of pre-construction condos is, first and foremost, it's such a hands-off opportunity. You're not finding a tenant for 4 to 5 years. You're not paying your maintenance fees. You're not paying your mortgage payments. For 4 to 5 years, you're just allowing the building to build, and you're paying off these incremental deposits. It's critical to find the right location, but I'll talk about that in the things to consider aspect when you're qualifying an investment. Second is the potential for passive appreciation. If you do find the right development in a right growing market, you have the potential every single year to grow in value as the area around you grows. In a very average case, if you find the right location with the right builder, with the right time in place, you should see in that 5-year construction about a 20% growth in value, or essentially you're going to be doubling the money that you put in around that completion time. And market to market, there's different performances, but in a very average case, when I've been working with REC now for over a decade, that's what I've seen. It's about a 20% on completion growth in value. And we have the ability to leverage that when the time is right. The third advantage of pre-construction opportunities is when you actually do have to close on it, it is out of all the residential opportunities, the most hands-off. The maintenance fees covers a lot of the snow shoveling, the landscaping. All you're doing is you're managing within the unit itself. And the majority of time it's to one group of tenants. And that makes it very advantageous because it is so hands-off. It's one that I gravitate towards myself because one, I'm not very handy. So I would have to pay for a lot of these services. But the other main reason is that a lot of the delinquencies within the actual specific unit are things like appliance repair, plumbing challenges. These are things that are either covered through your building insurance, or these are things that you can make a call and you not really even have to go to the condo itself. Now, location is critical for all investments I'm going to be speaking about, but when it comes to pre-construction, location is very important. And there's 3 pillars that I look at when I'm analyzing a market. First is transit. You have to find because you can't pick up the building and move it somewhere else. Location is very important. And transit's the first thing I look at. I want to see what development or investments the municipal, provincial, and federal government are putting in to a specific micro market. Values will always follow transit, and you want to get into an area as early as possible on the transit growth-wise. Second is population growth. You want to target micro markets that have a lot of pending and approved permits for high-rise development, but get in as early as possible because, as I said before, your values are going to be increasing with the growth of that area itself. And the last one that a lot of people don't typically talk about, but I think is really important, is employment diversity. Employment diversity is very important. You don't want to anchor your opportunity on an industry that only has, or on a location that only has one main industry of employment. Because, for example, let's say it's automotive. When that automotive plant is, threatening to go to another market, what happens with that micro market? It rides this turbulent, cyclical appreciation, depreciation. And so it's very harsh. What you want to do is you want to try and find a diverse employment sector within that micro market, because that's going to help you at least have that stable up and down upwards trend that we like to see as investors. And that's pre-construction. Next is multifamily. So multifamily opportunities are something that has 5 or more doors. You usually have to put minimum 25% down of the original purchase price, but we're usually seeing right now, especially with the current state of interest rates, between 30 to 35%. And that is something that you do have to consider is the capital down. The advantages with multifamily opportunities, first and foremost, is the ability to generate cash flow. That specific asset type is usually one that investors gravitate towards, that are trying to get cash flow within their portfolio. As well, because it is a larger property, the ability to add units or to attract developers for future development on that specific lot is advantageous as well. You have the ability to add units, which will help your value because you're changing the fundamental asset type from, call it a 5-plex if you're adding an accessory dwelling unit in the back. A 5-plex is now a 6-plex, and those are valued differently. As well, though, with the larger lots, if you can attract the right builder, you do have the ability in the future to do some sort of like assembly play where they're trying to purchase your lot to build either a townhome development or a high rise. And you get the ability to do that a lot more with multifamily. Things to consider though, with multifamily, there's a tremendous amount of positives, but the things to consider first and foremost is the financing capabilities. You hear that a lot as an advantage for multifamily. They look at the state of the property and how it's performing compared to the investor itself who's purchasing it, which is true, but that's not the full picture. And I do recommend everyone going out and speaking to that investor-focused mortgage broker that can help you build those plans. But the reality is putting the multifamily or commercial deal together is a lot more intricate, takes a lot more time, and it's a lot more intensive than in your everyday residential investment. So that's something to consider. Next is capital. You will have to, in most cases, put more capital down for this property. We're not buying something at $600,000. In most cases, even in a tertiary market, we're well over the $1 million for a multifamily opportunity. And that does take more capital. Management of the units itself or the building is something that you have to stress with multifamily. Sure, you can have property managers in place that can help you with it. One that comes at a higher cost, which eats into your overall return. But there is still a lot of management involved. You got to make sure, the landscaping is done, it's properly being plowed. As well, when you're dealing with more than 1 or 2 groups of tenants, there's also that dynamic between the tenants. That is something that you're going to have to manage. Next is grandfathered in tenants. That is something to consider as well. And the term grandfathered in tenants, if you're not familiar with that, that's essentially tenants that have been in that specific property for 10, 15, 20 years at times, and they're paying significantly under what market rent is. And that is an advantage because when you get tenant turnover, you have the ability to renovate and to increase the rent to whatever market value is. But it's something to consider that you do typically have in multifamily opportunities, especially ones that aren't newly constructed. You do have very low tenant turnover there, especially if you have a lot of grandfathered in tenants, and it's something to consider. The next asset type is commercial investments. The financing aspect for multifamily and commercial are very similar. They look at the state of the property. They do have to typically put more than 25% down in most cases, but instead of your residential tenants, you're renting out to a business. It could be industrial, it could be manufacturing. There's a whole bunch of different groups, farming, agricultural. There's a whole bunch of different groups for commercial investing, asset types there. But you have the ability with commercial opportunities. One is the ability for cash flow, just like multifamily opportunities. But you don't fall under the landlord and tenant relationships as much. The relationship between a commercial landlord and a business who's leasing out the space is a lot more favored towards the landlord compared to that multifamily or residential opportunity. And that is an advantage there. When the company is late on the rent that they're due, you have a lot more enforcement ability there to actually either get it or to get them out so you can re-rent it to a company that is right for that space. Things to consider with commercial opportunities, actually with multifamily as well, is supply. Especially in markets like this where we're starting to see it transition into a more of a buyer's friendly market. Those asset types, the supply completely dries up. And I'm noticing that right now within the Greater Toronto area and Southern Ontario is the supply of multifamily and commercial has completely dried up. So it's a lot harder to actually find the opportunities that do work, but there are still ones there. Another advantage is the ability to, a thing to consider, is the management aspect of the units itself. It's a little bit easier than your everyday residential multifamily, but still there's some management involved as well. And lastly is the financing capabilities. For all the advantages that commercial and multifamily have, you still have to make sure that you can get the financing for it. And that is something that you should all consider. The last active asset type that I see investors get into are those rehab or those fixer-upper opportunities. And I wanted to separate that from the turnkey residential. The rehab opportunities are properties that need some work, right? They either have unfinished basements, they have very dated kitchens or bathrooms. You need to, in most cases, do a complete renovation to increase the value in hopes of increasing the value of that specific asset. And one thing to consider there is financing. Obviously, it is a residential opportunity. As I said before, in most cases, you do have to put 20% down of the purchase price, but you do also need to be able to get the mortgage relatively soon. So that is something that you need to consider. One thing that you also have to look at when you're looking at these rehab opportunities is the holding carrying costs involved. We're not talking about it being vacant for 1 or 2 months. In a very average case, we're seeing 6 months, 7 months, 8 months of it being vacant. We have to understand, are we okay with having it vacant? Are we okay? Do we have enough saved that we can withstand this vacancy while the construction is being done? And that's something that we have to consider as investors. I would definitely recommend assembling your all-star team first of service providers, of contractors, of painters, of your realtor, your mortgage broker team. Have everything in line first. And definitely, especially on the contracting team, have a few in your back pocket as well, because timelines could change for that specific company as well. You can do the best screening of a service provider. You're really only going to know how they perform when they're actually in and doing the work. And sometimes it's just not in line with what they said. So it's important to have that in mind. I would push whatever your expectations on completion, push it at least 3-4 months. Have 3-4 months additionally saved to make this investment actually work for you. The advantages, though, with these rehab types of opportunities is, one, you're getting some forced appreciation through renovations. And I find investors who do this are ones that are trying to jumpstart their portfolio. They're trying to get some initial capital very quickly within that 6 months to a year, and they explore that option, right? They explore these flipping options. As well, you do have the ability to create cash flow. In most cases, when you're adding, especially if you're adding units to the basement, you're creating a new unit there. You have the ability now to rent it out, and in most cases, you should be cash flow positive when the renovations are completed. So you get passive appreciation, you get the ability for cash flow. Lastly is desirability. This one is the complete other side of the coin of your turnkey residential. The pool of buyers is a little bit less, which means that we as investors have the ability in that type of asset to negotiate a little bit more. Negotiate closing date, negotiate purchase price, negotiate options in regards to potentially being able to get in and do some work first. And there's a lot of advantages there, but there are things to consider. And the main thing to consider is when you're trying to invest in these rehab opportunities to flip, sometimes markets aren't on your side. And we've seen that a lot in the 2022 to now. Actually, if someone bought at the top of the market February 2022 a property that they were looking to flip, that 6-month delay of getting that property actually renovated and to the point where they need to sell now, you now have an issue when it comes to that appreciation and the purchasing side of it, because of the pool of buyers, right? If there's lack of buyers' confidence in the market, it takes a lot longer to sell, and the values might not be in line with what you need it to sell for. So the margins are very intricate there, and you need to have a proper business plan in place when you're doing that specific investment. You do see a lot of first-time investors wanting to explore these flips, and honestly, I would advise towards more that turnkey residential compared to the rehab opportunity. You'll get slower passive appreciation potentially, but You can rent it out fairly quickly. You don't have to deal with carrying costs as well. If you've never done a full-scale renovation before, there's a lot of things you'll learn while you do it. And I think for the first investment, maybe don't be a test subject. Try to find something that has a little bit more of a grounded approach. And those are the asset types. Again, passive investments and active investments. Those are two totally different groups of real estate investments. But the reason why I spoke about it right now at the introduction is because when we're building a plan for investments that have direction, it's important to diversify and have a few different asset types within. So it's important to understand what it is that you actually have to do management-wise for these. And that brings me to the main part of the conversation today. There's a term that a lot of investors use and that we use here at REC Canada, which is building a laddering plan. Laddering plan is a very sexy term, but essentially what it is, it's very simple. What you're trying to do with a laddering plan, when you're building your real estate portfolio and you're trying to get a plan for your next 5 years, you want to make sure that you stagger the maturity dates of your mortgages, as well as the payout dates for your active and your passive investments. You don't want the maturity dates to be close to your other active investments. And on the payouts of your passive as well as active investments, you don't want all of that to fall in line together. On the staggering the maturity dates for your mortgage, that's very critical. One, because it hedges against turbulence in your life. Let's say, for example, you own 3 income properties. All 3 mortgages are up for renewal within 6 months of each other. But a few months prior, you just lost your job. You might have a little bit of a challenge actually going and securing those mortgages moving forward. As well, it hedges against interest rate turbulence. The more spread out your maturity dates are for your active investments, the better your rate is going to be. It's all will average out, but it will spread out. And think about it now, right? Like, let's say we had 3 mortgages that were coming up for renewal around, call it 6 months ago. We might have a liquidity issue now. The challenge might not be being able to get the mortgage. The challenge might be actually being able to hold on to these properties at that new interest rate. If you spread it out, you have an ability at least to ride through the turbulence a little bit easier. In regards to the payouts of your investments, you don't want everything as an investor to be paid out at the same time. You want to stretch the amount of tax that we have to pay on the growth. And it's really important to have some clear timelines that we can kind of shuffle in between. And that's really advantageous there as an investor. But the main reason why we want to actually build a real estate portfolio with the maturity dates and payout dates in mind, i.e. a laddering plan, is because we have the ability as investors to leverage growth at different times if we plan it effectively. And that gives us the ability to always have our money being worked for us. And that is the strength. And the one nice thing about building these investment plans, because as I said at the beginning, it is not a one-size-fits-all plan. My plan and Carrie, your plan, we could have a totally different plan. But if we understand the maturity dates, we understand the capital, and we understand what it is you want to get out of your investment portfolio, then we can at least create these very personalized, customizable plans. And that's the fun thing. That's what I love to do. And that's why when Jazz and Simeon, had talked to me about coming today and to speak to all of our REC insiders in person as well as virtual, I was geeking out. I was so excited because now I get to actually go do a whiteboard session and show you hypothetically, based off of a client profile, how do we build these plans? And I think this is something that after today, all the investors who are watching, just go home and do exactly what I'm doing, what I'm about to do right now, which is how do I actually go in, how do I understand where I am right now? And how do I get where I need to be? And first and foremost, you got to ask yourself the right questions, right? How much capital do I have right now? Why is it that I'm investing? The why is it that you're investing? there's a few different common answers that I hear investors have. And the first one is that you're trying to transition out of your 9 to 5. Great. You understand the why now. When is it that you're trying to transition out of it? Is it tomorrow? Or is it 5 years? Is it 10 years? Understand that. There will be some follow-up questions that you'll have to answer. The other common one is that you're trying to offset loss of income or offset negative cash flow in your portfolio. So you're just trying to generate some cash flow to keep like a self-enclosed investment portfolio. That's a very common one. And then the last one is that they're trying to build wealth for future generations. And all three, when I hear that, there are different asset types that I would recommend based off of it, right? If we're talking about cash flow, what asset types did I talk about that had cash flow? Turnkey residential, rehab opportunities, multifamily. If someone's looking to have that generational wealth or to have that snowball effect happening so they can at 5 years leverage their assets to actually go and invest into something a little bit bigger or to transition out of their 9 to 5, whatever it is, then that could be turnkey residential, that could be pre-construction, right? Those are the two. And you have to ask yourself the right questions. And the best way for me to visualize a laddering plan is to actually do a little bit of a whiteboard session here. And please, everyone here that's able to actually read it, excuse my chicken scratch. I really think I should have been a doctor because of the way that I write, but unfortunately, I'm not a doctor, but you have to deal with my chicken scratch. So first, let's go through a client profile. And this is a real client investor profile that I've spoken with recently. So this specific investor profile, I'm going to do it here. Stephen, can you see if I go up here? Yeah, you're good. Okay, so this specific investor has saved capital, $50,000 saved, and they own their primary residence. They've owned their primary residence now for over 5 years. Okay, so it's this specific investor profile. They have $50,000 saved, and they've owned their primary for 5 years. Their goals is that they're trying to get 5 doors within their portfolio in 10 years, okay? That's their goal. And that's a very common goal. That's a very common one. You hear actually 10 doors in 10 years is what you usually hear. Would you be okay with having 5 doors in 10 years? Is usually how. Are you okay with 5? So this goal, their goals is 5 doors. $5 doors in 10 years. Okay. Now we know who they are. $50,000 saved. They've owned their primary for 5 years, and the goal is to get 5 doors in 10 years. Here's how I would, visualize this when I'm trying to build them that customizable investment plan. I want to start here, a line here, being year 1. Actually, it's better this way. Let's do it this way. We're going to draw a line. Okay? This here is where we are today. I'm going to call this year 1. Okay? Can we see this? Year 1. Okay? We know that they have their primary that they've owned for 5 years. So they have the ability here potentially to leverage the passive appreciation or the equity in their property. And they have $50,000 saved. Year 1, to get this 5 doors in 10 years, what I've seen investors do is buy 2 specific properties within that first year. That is a pre-construction opportunity and an income property. So we're going to put here in year 1, we're going to draw, I'm going to keep this on me. we're going to see an income property. So I'm just to say income property here, year one, as well as a pre-construction opportunity. Now, there is the nice thing about creating customizable plans. There's not a right opportunity to buy first when it comes to pre-construction and income properties. It actually depends on your financing capabilities and where the capital lies. If we're buying the income property first, you're going to be using the growth or the equity from your primary residence here. So what you're going to be doing with the income property is you're going to be refinancing, taking the 20% of whatever this purchase price is, and you're going to be putting it down here. If you're going to the route of an income property first, what I would recommend doing is try to explore markets that are in the rise, that has a little bit of turbulence because of the price drops that we're currently seeing, but are in a market that shows signs of transit growth, population growth, as well as the employment diversity. You want to find a market for your income properties that have a passive appreciation between 3 to 5%. In Southern Ontario, for example, a great market to explore is a market like Niagara, St. Catharines, Welland, maybe Hamilton. Hamilton might be tough because of the margins. You might not get cash flow positive opportunities, but the focus on your income property in year one is to find something that's turnkey, find something that's cash flowing a bit, and find something in the market that should be growing 3 to 5% per year. That's very important. If you're trying to get 5 doors in 10 years, you need to invest into a market on the active side that is in a growing market. And then what you would do here, if the example is buying income property first, you would buy the income property first, you'd use the equity from your primary as a down payment. I would probably first, especially if this is your first investment, find the property, close on it, rent it out, and probably hold it for 2 or 3 months first before you explore then this pre-construction opportunity. Try to make sure that everything is the way that it should be and then you can explore another option. I personally believe the pre-construction side is actually the better when we're trying to build a laddering plan and staggering maturities dates as well as completion dates for the pre-construction. I personally believe it's more important. You find more success with finding the pre-construction opportunity first. You're going to be using a portion of the $50,000 that you have saved, and you're trying to find a pre-construction opportunity that has a completion between 4 to 5 years minimum. The more the better, but let's call it, in this hypothetical example, a 5-year completion. Okay, and I'm going to write it here. So we have here the pre-con, 5 years, it's a completion, right? So for the pre-construction opportunity, we're not doing much for 5 years, right? We're just paying off those incremental deposits, and we at least know when the completion is. And today's 2024, so that means that we're probably leaning towards 2029 being the completion if we were to buy something today for pre-construction. And that's why I think pre-construction, purchasing that first, if you're doing 2 in the year, would be the best route, because now that we've secured this opportunity, we know that completion is 2029, 5 years. We now can buy the income property, and we got to make sure when we're building this laddering plan that the maturity date of the mortgage is not 5 years, right? It's not 2029. We have the option now at this point to do a 3 or a 4 year in this hypothetical example. And I personally think with this one is a 3 year. You would get a 3-year mortgage with this example. So we're buying the income property, and this is a 3-year maturity date, okay? So we got 5 years here. Completion is when you're going to actually close on this property, and a 3-year income property is a 3-year maturity date here, okay? That brings out so year 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay. So for 3 years, well, this mortgage is maturing here. So for 3 years for the income property, you're renting it out, you're generating some sort of cash flow, and hopefully you're putting the cash flow away to offset rainy days and delinquency or damages. And you're lowering the balance on your mortgage as well. You're allowing the area to appreciate. That's why it's critical, that 3 to 5% per year, because what you're going to see here is you're going to see the values, grow that 3 to 5%. And by year 3, you now have the ability through the mortgage maturing to refinance if there is enough growth there. And if there's enough growth there, you have the ability to refinance it. You can either take out some of the growth and put it away for the closing coming up with the pre-construction opportunity. Or if this specific investor now has, because it's 5 years to completion here, if they have the ability to save up the remaining down payment as well as the closing costs, then you have the ability here to go and buy another property at year 3. And let's put it here. Let's say this is another property that we've been able to buy. Actually, let's do it by year. Actually, the real data would be that you refinance here. So call this an equity term part. And then you would actually buy your next opportunity here at year 4. And then you have the ability now to go buy something else. Sure, that will lower the equity that you actually have within this specific property, but now it's being worked and you just got another door out of that. You have the ability in this specific opportunity to either buy another residential income property or a pre-construction opportunity. Whatever you choose, the next one after that, choose the other. So let's say this investor at year 4 decided to buy an income property from the growth of this specific asset, okay? What we're trying to plan is we're trying to plan the maturity dates of this one and this one to not be year 5. The reason being is that we have to close on year 5 for this specific opportunity. So we now have, by the completion, this investor now has 3 properties, right? If they've chosen income property, we get passive appreciation, principal paydown, and cash flow for these 2 opportunities. The pre-construction opportunity, it's been hands-off for 5 years. You're just paying off these deposits every year, for example. And now we have the ability, because the value should have increased here as well. It's more of a kind of like here. We now have the ability to close on it. Again, we're trying to stagger the maturity dates of the mortgage. So we're trying to make sure that this one, and this one are not at the same time. And we have the ability now to close on it, to rent it out. And if the growth is right, you can leverage the passive appreciation at this point at year 5. And you can now go and use the growth in either going, because they want 5 doors, so we've now done 3 in 5 years. They now can go and buy an income property at this point, whatever they didn't choose here. So they can buy another pre-construction opportunity or an income property at this point. And now with staggering the maturity dates and leveraging growth at different times, we've been able to get 4 doors in 5 years. The nice thing about it is, I know we have this overall goal, but we've moved the needle a little bit by planning strategically the maturity dates on the mortgages, as well as when we're leveraging the growth. And the best thing about it is all of the growth, let's say we get 4 here, and then by year 7, we get another opportunity by leveraging, this one here, maybe this income property here, right? And so that's now 5 doors in 7 years. The best thing about it now is by year 10, we have the ability as investors to leverage the growth in all of these opportunities, if it's right in regards to your liquidity, if you're able to withstand it and rents have increased the way that they should have. We have the ability by year 10 now, in this hypothetical example, to actually go and lower the balance of your primary residence at that point. Leverage the growth of your full portfolio to actually lower the balance on your actual primary residence's mortgage. And this will help you in regards to your living expenses, which is a main part I think investors should always try to do, which is try to control your living expenses and use your portfolio to help with that. And that is how you build a plan with strategic maturity dates in mind. The nice thing about it is you have the ability. I think income properties and pre-con are two active investments that pair very well because of how hands-off pre-con is for 5 years. But you have the ability, for example, let's say year 3, you haven't done anything. You have the ability to sprinkle in, a land development opportunity, a REIT opportunity, a private lending deal. You have the opportunity to sprinkle some of that using your registered funds here, which now, now we're able to really get things moving every single year. We're having a payout every year. We're having a mortgage maturing every year that we have the ability, potentially, if the time and the equity buildup is right, we can take out. And it's very important. In this hypothetical example, this is something that is very realistic. I've seen, at this point, over 100 investors do, with this similar investor profile, do just this. But it all starts, very important, with year 1, planning what it is that you're actually going to be using or doing with the capital. And I think it's planning which one here is right for you. And that really depends on your customized plan that you should have. Do we have any questions?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes. Since a lot of it hinges on the growth of the market, an X factor which you cannot control, how would this plan differ if the growth is of the window?
So,
repeat the question.
Yeah. So the question was, and what's your name? Sorry. Kish. So Kish has a question in regards to what happens. Are you okay if I use this example? What happens if, for example, at year 3, when the mortgage matures, the market hasn't grown in the way that we expected? The nice thing is that, Kish, you've still taken action here, right? If it's not the right time to leverage your equity at year 3, then we just push it down a little bit, and we then leverage the equity at year 6. So even if the values stay exactly the same, and do you think that the values are going to stay the same from where they are now? This is a real question.
I guess the interest rate is the caveat.
Right? So if you actually look at a 100-year trend in Canada, real estate values go up and down upwards. If you zoom in within a year, 2-year increment, you're going to see a lot of this. But if you actually scale out, and that's the real strength with compound growth, is that the value increases are a lot stronger than the value decreases. And the compound growth really makes a difference. But you're also, with an active investments, is that you're lowering the amount on the balance on your mortgage. So even if values stay the same, which I believe we both don't think that's going to happen, but even if they do, you just have to wait till it's the right time to leverage that equity with the balance turning off. It just pushes now, instead of a 10-year 5 doors, it's 15 years and 5 doors.
Yeah, so you cannot be as aggressive.
That's right. Yeah.
But you're still getting some income, obviously, from the rent yield and whatnot.
Yeah, you're getting income, you're getting cash flow. That's why it's critical with the income property. I think at least to get a little bit of cash flow at the beginning is really important, because you're going to every single year increase the rents, or through tenant turnover, you're going to get new market rents. But when you're refinancing it, you're assuming more debt here. You're lowering the equity that you built up. And sure, that's great, because now you've been able to convert the equity into another asset, that could be, even call it $650,000. Even if you hold the 4 properties that we have here for 25 years, you've really only put in $50,000 plus been able to, in this specific example, plus the added mortgage payments on the refinance. And that's been able to generate you over what? $2.5 million of real estate if values stay the same. But that's a great question. I would say the long-winded answer, but the short answer is it's important. That's why you stagger the maturity dates. Just see where the market is. And I also am a firm believer of not leveraging Kish to the full extent of the ability to get the capital. Be conservative with even what you pull out.
Yeah, because when you're ready to pull out on year number 3 or what have you, if the interest rate is a big factor in terms of what you're getting, sometimes you don't want to pull out because
that's right. You got to explore your options, but it's very critical that you need to have the maturity dates of your mortgage not be so close. Because then because if that one's not right, great. I just go sign another 3-year or 5-year fixed term, and we'll just hold that because that's the plan, that we're going to hold it for a few more years. But at least you know you have another one coming up next year that you might be able to leverage.
Yes. In the scenario you gave, with the investor, right? You mentioned that they own their primary residence. Is that owning full of their carrying a mortgage on it?
Oh, yeah, sure. So the question is, and what's your name, sorry?
Sean.
Sean. So Sean asked the question in regards to, with this investor profile, do they own the property outright or do they have a mortgage on the property? In this hypothetical example, actually it's real because this is something that someone has done. They own their property, but they still had a mortgage balance on their primary residence. But they have that's why owning it for 5 years is critical, Sean, because they've built it for 5 years and they've lowered the balance on their mortgage for 5 years.
Now, what would you say would be the loan to asset scenario for this person? Let's just say, for example, it's a couple and they're combined making $120,000. Their mortgage for that property now is probably, their primary residence is probably $40,000 per year. How much loan in terms of equity can they take to purchase that first property at the same time carrying those two mortgages, considering that they might just be able to break even on the first property?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. That's why Sean, so Sean's question was, in this hypothetical example, what happens if I'm understanding you correctly, the specific investor, when they refinance that property, what happens if they're really pushing, that they're redlining their actual affordability? And that's why you have to make sure, Sean, that you're not over leveraged. If it means that we start year 1 at year 6 of owning this property, that's fine. Then we do that there. I would recommend being comfortable. If you're refinancing your primary residence, you have to be comfortable with the added interest rates that you're incurring. And in the best case, it would be that you would be paying it, because the income property itself should be cash flow positive. Let's say we go this route first, right? Should be cash flow positive. But now if you're expecting the $300 a month to help here, I probably would say that this isn't the right route. That's just me.
And one last question.
You don't want to be too over leveraged. That's why. You want to be comfortable with your investments. There's one classification, and I'm so happy, Sean, you asked me this question. There's one classification I ask every single insider that I build real estate action plans with, which is a happiness level. Is this making you happy? Because that's important. If you're stressed about your mortgage payments for your primary residence that you've leveraged out, or you've used the equity to go and buy income properties, that's great, you're building wealth. But if you're losing sleep over it, we might have to think about some other options, which is maybe instead of an income property, you pair a pre-construction with a REIT investment that's 10% compounded per year. By year 5, you're doubling the money that you put in, right? So maybe that's that.
One last question. In year 3 of your model, right, there is the possibility that have to go get a mortgage for your third property, right? Now you have to qualify for that property. At what point do the mortgage broker look at you and say, well, look, based on your debt that you're carrying for those 2 mortgages, what would be a nice point for the mortgage broker to look at you and say, look, you have 2 properties, including a primary property. Where is that red line?
Oh, sure.
You cannot qualify. You can qualify for that third.
Yeah. So the question was that Sean asked, which is, at what point are you too over leveraged to actually get a mortgage for your opportunities? And that's a great question, Sean. So it's critical to work with an investment-focused mortgage broker that is doing exactly what we're doing as well, but on the financing side of it. And that is something to consider with pre-construction, for example, is in 5 years, you have to be in a place where you can get that mortgage. And sometimes you're not, right? And it's very critical that when you are building your investment plans, it just goes down to not being too over leveraged. You're not biting off too much. You don't want to redline. You want to create, you want to be able to hear the engine, but but you don't want to be pushing it. And that's the sweet spot. And to actually find out, like, Sean, what that sweet spot is, we'll just have a conversation. We'll create that customizable plan. Okay?
I just want to comment on that. That's very important what he just said. Regardless of how many properties you have, whatnot, I'm a mortgage broker. So we look at from the eye of the lender, right? Because at the end of the day, we ask the lender to finance the properties. So we have to convince the lender, right? We're working for you, but we're trying to convince the lender. We're the in between. So you came in as okay, I need to refinance this, or I need to buy this, or whatnot. Then we put all the liabilities together of all the properties. So outstanding debt versus the income versus. So in that, we encompass what is called TDS-GDS ratio. So we generally like to see the TDS-GDS below 40. Then lenders are not going to say no to you. The moment TDS-GDS, and that also factors in your discretionary income, etc. All these things come into play. It's a very quick 3-minute calculation. When the GDS ratio is well below 40, then the lenders are going to step forward and accept your offers.
Yeah.
For lenders, they accept our offers. The moment the TDS-GDS ratio go closer to 40 or higher, then the lenders try to shy away because they're looking at that. So very simple in terms of that. And the other one, payout in 5 years, you have to disclose that to us because we don't know that, right? So when we pull your credit score, when we pull that, that property will, the investment property will not show up.
Yeah.
Right?
The pre-con won't.
Yeah.
The pre-con won't.
Yes. So you're going to disclose to us as an advisor working with you.
Yeah. So you got to be very clear. You got to give the whole picture.
You got to tell us the symptoms.
Yeah.
So, and how. Also, you have to tell us maybe your older daughter's marriage is coming up, and you're going to do this one, right?
It's exactly the same. It would be the same approach, but now, what a mortgage broker would do is now, I would say like it's a difference between like theoretical science and actual practicing, or theoretical physics and like actual like physics. I don't know what the other term is, but as investment advisors, we're the theoretical side, right? Like this is what could be possible, but nothing starts even here without having that investment-focused mortgage broker tell us it's available.
Right. That's very important. Right doctor. Right doctor.
Yeah. Right doctor. Right. You don't want to go to optometrist for your foot. Right. Does anyone else have any questions? So in regards to building these customizable plans, because it is truly it's not a one size fits all. What our portfolio management does is something that we call a real estate action plan. And if you're part of our world, you know that we've spoken about the real estate action plan many times, but it's just a way for us to understand who you are as an investor and to build something like this with direction in mind. And that is something that I oversee and our team does very well. It's now time to actually go and book a call with us. Regardless of where you're at in regards to investing, the earlier the better, let's be honest. Go to reccanada.com/coffee, and Stephen's going to be putting that in there. That's a direct booking page to our portfolio management division. It is now time to build that customizable plan for you. It'll take 20-25 minutes initially. It's not going to cost you anything. It's a way for us just to see how we might be able to help. And I use that might word very strongly. As you can see here, the reality is that we might not be able to help everybody. But putting pen to paper, understanding, and having a brainstorming session and understanding direction, as well as reasons why we are investing, is just such a good brainstorming session for yourself. I think we should be doing it every few months anyways, because just like life changes, your goals may change as well.
Do you charge any fees for that?
No fees at all. It's something we do complimentary to all of our insiders. In fact, this year we've done over 700. And I'm really proud of my team that we've been able to do over 700 real estate action plan discussions.
So regardless whether they're your clients or not, or
Yeah.
just an information section.
It's a way to see who you are.
So in doing so, are you a realtor also then?
Yeah. So REC Canada. So it's a common question, right? How do we get paid? We are realtors, real estate brokers. We get paid through the transaction, but we have the abundance mindset that we're here to help you. We're here to help create some clarity And if it means that you're ready to invest, we hope we've done a good enough job in advising that at least, you hear what we have. And if not, it's okay. At least we have that 20, 25-minute conversation where we learn more about you.
Yeah, two things. For anybody who's new and starting off and whatnot, you will not find a single realtor that will put up a plan like this. This is almost like an academy put together.
Kish is helping my ego right now. It's inflated me. No, but it's true though. It's a very unique unique approach.
This is reality.
Yeah.
Realtors, they're only for transactions done. You have no relationship with them. The next time they'll knock your door is if you want to sell. That's it.
But
here, if you have a portfolio and if you have somebody watching over and whatnot, they're doing a lot of the work for you and doing wherever you have a blind spot.
Yeah.
Which is very important, especially in this market.
It's true. Well, I think that the last decade, they created a lot of bad habits for investors, right? Because every year values are going up 10, 12, 14% per year. And these types of markets show these bad moves potentially or show exposure, right? Right now, it's very critical as investors that we do have to have an end goal in place and invest with that end goal in place. And that is something that and thanks Kish, that REC Canada is very focused on.
Yeah, last 10 years, unfortunately, everybody became a real estate expert.
Yeah, that's true.
And when the music stopped, they realized they're caught naked.
Yeah, that is true. And everyone that's here, everyone virtual, thank you for actually joining me. What I do have is I wrote a laddering guide on investing. So if anyone goes to reccanada.com/coffee, books a call with us, I'll be able to send you that laddering guide. It's a really simple but a very effective guide that I try to send to every single person we speak with.
I just have one last question.
Sure, ask away.
In the interest of everyone.
Yeah.
I don't know whether this is the right forum for it.
Just ask. It's fine.
Where do you think, or your mind tells you that the interest rates are going?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask about the market. And what's your name? Sorry. Ronald. Ronald. So, in regards to interest rates, I don't think nobody has a crystal ball. And I actually produced a piece of content on this, which is I got an article from an RBC advisor, TD advisor, and CIBC advisor about where they think rates are going to go by the end of the year. All three had completely different tones. So where I believe the question should be asked, because I don't think anyone knows where interest rates are going to go. I have a prediction. I can also predict who's going to win the NBA finals, but no one's going to know until that's done. I think the right question, Ronald, would be how the market is going to respond because of these interest rates, regardless of where they go up or down.
That was my second question.
Yeah. So you're now bringing me into my late night thinking because, I don't watch Netflix. I actually think about, where markets are going, and I don't know why. I just have a glass of wine to think about that. And here's what I predict. I predict that we're still going to see in prime markets, about 3 to 5% per year compounded growth for the next probably 7 or 8 years or so. I'm going to say that it'll probably start to have more of a lagging factor once the average price reaches $1.7 to $1.8 million in prime markets. And the reason being is that the pool of purchasers who can buy a $2 million purchase is that much smaller. It's not half. It's it's like 15% of that people who can buy it at $1 million. And then the question is to be asked at that point, because I still think we're going to have that stable growth. Development has been holding off. Developers have been holding off in new units, and that is going to, by 2030, 2031, create more of I believe, a frenzy buying again window, where we're going to see a rush of appreciation again because of the limited amount of supplies coming in at that 2031, 2032 time. And then what happens, though, when we do see slower passive appreciation in prime markets? Once it reaches, again, I think that 1.7 to 1.8 million. What I believe is going to happen is I think that investors are going to start transitioning into opportunities where you can change the fundamental asset type, where you can go and buy a single family home and put in a triplex. Those are what investors are going to be looking for at 2035, 2036, because that's what's going to make sense at that time. Because you're now forcing the appreciation. You're not being valued at a single family home. You're being valued at a triplex. And as more government intervention is, seems to be allowing this more, I think they're just being more proactive than reactive, which is they're getting ahead of it, because I think that's going to be the natural next step once we reach the average prices of 1.7, 1.8. And that's what I think about at midnight, guys, is that.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That's fun.
So this particularly you do for all